Hello everyone, this is 3D printed animatronic creature, part 28, core editing. I've still been under the weather some. I'm just trying to get healed up. I got new medication coming. My old medication kind of got me with some side effects, but I'm finally getting some kind of results, but slowly. But this is core editing. And what I'm going to be doing here is the animatronic has been built, but now I need to make sure to make a core. It kind of needs to be like the animatronic as far as so we can get this skin to fit the animatronic correctly. And the core is an important key. I mean, it's very important for this so-called silicone mask to fit on this animatronic. Well, we need to make sure that this is correct. And we just need the outside of this animatronic, and we need to fill in any spaces to make this one solid piece. And any so-called artifacts that are inside need to be removed. And if you design a lot as much as I do, if you have something inside, that's going to create an error. And if you have anything that's inside this so-called mesh, it's going to try to print it. And as far as 3D printing anything, it's not going to like it, so it's going to come up as an error. So the best way to do this is to remove everything, and so we can keep that original shell of the animatronic. And as you see here, I'm starting to, make everything in half. That way it's easier just to mirror everything, but we still need to keep the measurement. And as you see here, these parts here are just going to be sticking out of this mesh, and it's going to be part of the model. And we need this so the skin of the lip, for instance, will hold on to these so-called lip mechanisms. And we need to block it out to where, that silicone won't go into that socket and lock it up. So it needs to be kind of designed as like a real lip would hold on to that so-called, device. And it's also designed that way, like in the eyelids also. And everything needs to be center. And it really needs to be perfect because this is key. But all this needs to be filled in, and just made sure that everything's, watertight to make one big model. But as you see, I'm just sitting here editing because if it's not on the outside, there's no sense of me even having it, and that would be an artifact, and it'd be show up as error. And I know there's probably software out there that would probably make this a lot smoother. But once again, always there's a learning curve with all softwares. But there's some softwares that do things, and they do it pretty good. But then as much stuff that I do on certain software, which is SketchUp, Blender, ZBrush, sometimes the software don't work correctly, and you have to figure out a way to do it without, wasting a lot of time. I've used a lot of software, and I've just kind of developed my own little workflow on how to do certain things. Back in the day when I was in high school, I took drafting, and we used paper and pencil to design things and compasses, and we had to do it, old school way, and there's a lot of people still do it that way. But as you see here, I'm just editing this chest piece and just dividing it exactly in half. But I've already taken a lot of these measurements just to make sure that everything has to be perfect. But as you see here, this mesh here on the neck, I kind of cleaned it up a little bit, kind of straightened it up because I got to kind of move this towards the mouth chin area. That way you don't really want, like, as far as the jawbone is going to be completely covered. And that's fine, but closer to the mouth or where the teeth are, which are blocked out as the correct size, because I don't want the silicone to hug the teeth. That way it would kind of make it stick on on the teeth or whatever, and I'm trying to avoid that. And it's just like I want like part of the chin to be touching as far as the animatronic chin. I want it to be hugging up against the so-called inside silicone mask. But a lot of this, once again, is I'm just trying to clean up the inside of this this big mesh, and this is going to be a very big mesh. But here I'm just kind of editing and just clean it up. Less work I have to do later. But as you see here on the eyes, I'm just taking this whole eye here and connecting it to the bridge of the nose, the eye socket area, and that way, I mean, and this goes quick in editing. It doesn't take a whole lot of time, uh, but I just got to make this all one piece. And when I start the sculpture onto the core, all I want is the outside of the creature onto the core. But I'm going to make it also to where there's going to be holes in the so-called sculpture for the eyes. And those eyes are on the core. So I'm going to transfer those eyes to the sculpture and also the lip hole or the mouth hole area. All that has to be joined into the new part of the core. But then I can remove that so-called mesh or the core mesh away and then add that to it so I don't have to sit there and edit the inside of the core to adapt to the so-called sculpture. And it's a lot of things you get to thinking about it, and it's just trying to make things easier on you. That way you don't have to worry about, because if I made the sculpture onto the core, like you see here, all I'm trying to do is get the skin to have a so-called shell. When it's poured, it's going to copy this, but that will be later when we physically cast the skin. But as you see here, I'm just editing, and what I'm doing is I'm connecting everything, all these parts together. And then I'll go inside and I'll remove any vertices that is making a so-called, artifact. And it can be kind of time consuming, but if I just connected everything, all the pieces without doing this, it'd be a lot more work to do. Molding this so-called animatronic, the sculpture in silicone, this way we can avoid or be easier to avoid a lot of some of the undercuts that we're going to have in this so-called animatronic. And that way we can get the so-called skin attached in only certain areas, and it will hug this core, which will hug the so-called animatronic like a mask, and then try to avoid any kind of a so-called like raincoat effect where it's too baggy or looks kind of fake, and I'm trying to avoid that. But as you see here, I mirrored it, and this is just a test mirror. And the reason why I'm doing a test is I take these measurements at a certain point of the eyelid, and I'm trying to get the same measurement when I didn't have it before I cut it in half, basically. And I have the same measurement. So we're good to go, and it's going to be all cleaned out on the inside, and it's going to be, a perfect mesh. That way we won't have any errors. But it's coming along. But like once again, I'm going to have to do some other things to the plate, make screw holes to the plate, and get everything pretty much ready. Like foresee what we're going to need to do as far as the molding and stuff, and like have vent holes and things like that. And also the vent holes are going to need to be to where the silicone will pour the skin into, because this is going to be the main core. But like I was saying earlier, that I'll be able to remove this so-called sculpture or the core sculpture off of this and just use that plate to connect to the sculpture. That way we won't have to do any more editing to it when the sculpture is made. But it's coming along well. It's just, me being ill and having to, you know, take off a little bit from this. But it's coming along, and soon I'll have a new chess piece available for my Patreons. And this it's just kind of a short version of what we had, but this is going to be a key component to where the skin's going to fit on. But I hope this helps. I know editing is kind of boring, but I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a good one. Later.